And we're live. Awesome. I'm going to test having the microphone a little further away from my mouth. I'll probably announce this again because no one's on right now. But so let me know if you can't hear me. It's tough when all the way down here. I know it's better audio, but it hurts my back. My tripod's not that tall for my mic yet. Maybe one day. So awesome win for the Jazz. I'll dig a lot into it because I feel like the stats don't really tell the story of this one. Even though the stats were awesome in the favor of the Jazz, I have been seeing weird trends with the Jazz stats, but we'll dig into that. And I mentioned some of those earlier. But overall vibes from the game, the Jazz were super confident. They came in, they knew they were going to win. Obviously, it was a little close at first, but they maintained that confidence. They were shooting with confidence. Some things that I loved seeing from the Jazz, obviously that Gobert dunk over Antetokounmpo, that was awesome. I watched that a few times before the stream. If you haven't seen it, it was I forget who the ball handler was, but Gobert went for a screen, then he slipped the screen, and that left him wide open, and Antetokounmpo just stepped in late, so Gobert got the dunk. That was awesome. Another cool thing that I was seeing is the Jazz, and I'm still debating in my head whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I'm leaning towards this as a good thing, but they had a little bit of swagger tonight, and I haven't seen much swagger from them. And I was kind of like, I wasn't really expecting it. Like I said, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing because sometimes when teams do that, they get a little cocky and then they think they're the unbeatable, which I don't think that's what I'm seeing from the Jazz, which is why I'm saying I'm leaning towards this as a good thing. But seeing the passes that they were making and the confidence with shooting, like that one play where Bogdanovich, he gets the ball, passes it behind his back, so he jumps up to get the ball, passes it behind his back before he even lands. Then Donovan Mitchell just rifles a ball all the way across the court. So he's in the corner, throws it across the court to the other corner where Joe Ingles is. Joe Ingles hits the three. That was cool to watch. And there were some other really cool passes. Mitchell was creative with his passing, which you love to see because I feel like, and we've talked about this on the channel, but I feel like Donovan Mitchell is going to end up being the primary ball handler for the Jazz in a few years from now. And so seeing him develop as a passer and a distributor is huge for the Jazz long-term success, in my opinion. So with that being said, I'll dig into the stats. If you have any questions, comments about the game, NBA in general, really just anything, go ahead and leave it in the live chat and I'll get to it after I dig through the stats. But yeah, let's get into it. So obviously awesome win for the Jazz. And I said at the beginning, I don't know how many made it on when I said this, but I've noticed some weird things in the like team stats for the Jazz. Even though they're winning, there's some trends that you normally don't see from a team that won a basketball game. One of them is the Jazz tend to let their opponents shoot more shots than the Jazz do, but their opponents normally make less, which is incredible. I don't know how their opponents are getting more shots off. I'm not seeing like huge differences in rebounds. I'm not sure what's going on there. But it's not a bad thing because they're not making their shots, or the Jazz opponents. And so like tonight, Milwaukee, they shot 10 more shots than the Jazz, but they made one less. And maybe the shooting more shots comes from the Jazz are getting to the free throw line. So that might be part of it, in which case that's not a bad thing at all to let your opponent shoot more if you're just not getting as many shots because you're getting to the free throw line. So that's something interesting. I haven't seen that much with any teams in the past. Obviously, I haven't followed like every team in the NBA super closely, but so that's really interesting to see. I've seen it several times this season and happen again tonight. So I thought I'd point that out. The Jazz were on fire. They were 52% from the field, and they they only shot 38 threes, which is kind of funny to say only 38 because that's a lot, especially considering what the Jazz were doing in seasons past. But and if it was a closer game, I think the Jazz would have shot more. It's just by the time in the third quarter, at one point in the third quarter, they're up by 20. So I think their mindset was more, hey, we're confident, we're hitting our shots. We don't need to shoot as many threes because they're giving us easy shots inside. Gobert was getting great dunks. And so it's just, if you can get easy shots inside, you don't need to take threes, especially when you're up. Taking threes tends to be a fast-paced thing. And when you're up by 20, if you can score most possessions and milk the clock, that's the best case scenario. And I think that's part of what the Jazz are doing. Jazz got to the free throw line great. I mentioned that they shot 34 free throws, made 29, so that was awesome. And other than that, like the Jazz just dominated. I'll point it out. I won't spend much time on it, but the only stat that like really stands out that the Jazz didn't do good at was turnovers again. The Jazz had 17 turnovers to the Bucks 10, but I'm not going to dwell on that because this was an awesome win, and I mention that every single time I'm on here. So the Jazz keep winning, so maybe eventually I'll stop bringing that up because at the end of the day, they're winning basketball games, and they are looking like an elite team. We'll get to why we talked about on last Saturday in our episode why we think the Jazz are title contenders, but I think they've even solidified that more tonight and last game as well. They're beating good teams, and the only thing that people had against the Jazz up until this point was that most of their games were against easy teams. But let's jump into the box score. Once I'm done with the box score, I'll get to the live chat. So any questions, comments in there, and I'll be pretty quick on the box score. But just one thing that I wanted to point out: the Jazz had 4 players with 25 points or more, and I loved seeing that. Obviously, Jordan Clarkson came off the bench. He was awesome tonight, and he was doing a lot more than just shooting as well. There's one play, like he wasn't doing this consistently, but there's one play that stood out where Giannis was guarding him, and he drove on Giannis, and it wasn't really like a pure Euro step, but he did kind of a slow 2 steps to get Giannis off of his rhythm on the defense, and he got the layup on Giannis, which is awesome for Jordan Clarkson. Mitchell did his thing, 26 points. He was actually plus 18, and he had 6 rebounds and 8 assists and only 2 turnovers. So this, I don't know. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think this game has been Mitchell's best game so far this year. I know it's not his best scoring wise, but I think what I saw from Mitchell, I liked his overall performance, especially considering he only had 2 turnovers more than I liked a lot of his other games where he scored more points. So I love seeing that from Mitchell. If we can see that more consistently, Jazz are no one is going to want to play the Jazz in the playoffs if we can see that from Mitchell consistently. As well as both Ingles and Gobert had 27 points. And I don't know what it is, but I feel like the Jazz do really good against the Bucks. Gobert does a good job at holding Giannis. Obviously, like Giannis, he had 29 points, which is great. But a lot of those points came after the game was pretty much decided. Giannis had almost no impact in the first half. And he kind of started catching fire towards the end, but not enough to break into the Jazz lead. And I think it was double digits pretty much the whole fourth quarter. And Brook Lopez did good on the Bucks, and I think that's just Brook Lopez can shoot threes. Obviously, one of the biggest weaknesses for the Jazz are facing centers who can shoot threes because it negates what Rudy Gobert does on the defensive end because he has to stretch out a little more, or it forces the Jazz to make a switch and have a mismatch on defense in order to let Gobert stay more towards the middle, and that's kind of a funky defensive set. But yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to cover as far as stats wise. Awesome game. Let me know what your questions are. Real quick before I get to the live chat, before I turned this on, before I started the live stream, we were 4 subscribers away from getting 400. So if we could get that before the end of the live stream, that would be awesome. So anyone who's listening who isn't subscribed, subscribe. We're all about the Jazz. We do Jazz post game analysis videos after every single game. Like this, it's a live stream format, so you can interact with us. And we also do 1 or 2 other videos a week, focused on the Jazz, and we touch on about other NBA stuff too, because that's fun. But we do stay focused on the Jazz. Also, if you are subscribed, but you have friends who are Jazz fans, like text them, get them to join the live stream tonight, get them to subscribe to the channel. If we could get to 400 by the end of the stream, that would be awesome. But yeah, with that said, and now I'll give you all time to go text your friends to let them join the live stream. I'll hop into the live chat. Awesome win. Agreed. This I feel like this win is a bigger statement win than probably any other win the Jazz have had so far. Obviously, they have some tough games coming up, so they need some more statement wins. But it's tough for anyone else to say that the Jazz aren't real contenders right now. The Jazz are for real. They're just playing great basketball. They're moving the ball, and it's just exciting to watch. Yeah. So along that, I feel like the Jazz, and this is kind of the reason why we started this channel originally, is we thought the Jazz were legit. Before the season, I don't think we thought they were as legit as they are now. I don't think we thought they'd be this good. But we knew they were good, and we knew no one was talking about them. And up until recently, they got very little national coverage, but now they're getting real respect. And kind of how I judge that is maybe I put too much weight into the Ringer. But if you guys are familiar with the Ringer, it's another sports channel. They have podcast, YouTube channel. They put out good content if you like sports, which if you're watching this video, you do like sports. But they are very much national. Like they don't really dive deep into more small market teams unless they're really good and they have the attention of the national media. And the Ringer put out a video talking about how the Jazz were contenders. And so that's a sign to me that people, and it's not just like diehard fans or just people around Utah or people who have lost to Utah so far, but it's like the league as a whole and the media as a whole and the fans as a whole are recognizing the Jazz are for real, which is awesome to get that recognition. But at the same time, the Jazz now have a target, so games are going to be harder for them. That being said, though, they're playing so good that I don't think that's not going to slow them down. Maybe it leads to a couple extra losses, but it's true. Like they're playing great basketball. I loved what I saw tonight. I've loved what I've been seeing for the past few games. Rudy was hitting his free throws. That's awesome. Let me check exactly what his numbers were from the free throw line. He shot 13 and he hit 9. So 9 for 13. I'll take that from Rudy Gobert any night. Joe's playing better and better after the rest he got. That's true. Nate, he kept bringing up that like when Joe, his longest consecutive streak of playing in an NBA game, when that ended because of his it was something with his Achilles. It wasn't like a major injury, but he just needed some rest. Nate was saying that not Rudy, sorry, Joe Ingles was going to come back stronger because of that. And honestly, like he started the season kind of slow. He was a little bit of a non-factor, but it's true ever since he got that rest, he's been hitting his shots better. He's been more confident on defense. Like before the rest, I feel like he was making a lot of stupid mistakes on offense. Now I haven't been seeing that as much. But yeah, and I think Joe Ingles is a huge part of this. Obviously, kind of player who can come out in a game like tonight and score 27. Other games he scores 9, but that's still 9 points that are probably all 3-pointers, and that really helps the Jazz. Easy buckets a lot of the times with him from the 3-point line. So one of the questions is, what are the Jazz prospects against the Lakers? I feel like we keep bringing this up every week, and I think it's good that we bring it up because that kind of is like if the Jazz can beat the Lakers, then they are for real title contenders because they're either like likelihood they're going to need to get through the Lakers, the Clippers, the West to make it to the championship. Honestly, and I don't have the exact date, but they're playing the Lakers sooner rather than later, so that game's coming up, and we'll see when that happens. But I think they have a good chance. Honestly, like the Lakers are going to be tough. No, like even for teams like Brooklyn, if Brooklyn was playing awesome with their three superstars, the Lakers are going to be a tough team. And that's just how it is when you have Anthony Davis and LeBron James. But I think the Jazz match up well. Obviously, it's going to be tough because the Lakers have Anthony Davis, who he's typically playing more of a center role for them now, who can shoot, and that makes it tough on Gobert. Obviously, Brook Lopez capitalized on that tonight, but it wasn't enough for the Bucks to win. So I don't think it's a perfect matchup for the Jazz, but I think with how the Jazz are playing, it's going to be tough for the Lakers to beat them. I'm really excited for the game. When they do play, I'm expecting it as long as everyone's healthy, especially if Mike Conley comes back, because that's something I didn't even mention. He was out again, and so once Conley's back, like I'm guessing he'll fit right back in and keep doing what he was doing once he comes back. And it's just going to be a tough matchup for the Lakers. Obviously, tough matchup for the Jazz, but I feel like there's how the Lakers team is built. There's two players you really need to worry about, and then they'll have other players who step up on any given night. But how the Jazz are is they have like an 8-9 man rotation, and with the exception of like I don't know Royce O'Neal and Derek Favors, you could see anyone in that rotation score 20 plus on any given night. So, and how the Jazz are playing, I think it's just a tough matchup for the Lakers. So, I'd probably honestly at this point I would take the Jazz, but it is the Lakers, so it's not like I'm going to say the Jazz by a blowout win. I guess that's possible and on any given night, but not in a 7-game series, I would say. Yeah, so lots of questions about the Lakers. Okay. Let's scroll too fast, so I got lost my spot. Okay, so this is one of Donovan's better games, but I'd say the best was against Boston. That's probably fair. And the interesting thing with like the Boston one versus tonight is like both games were awesome for the Jazz. The as far as entertainment value, the Boston one was probably more entertaining. But and Donovan Mitchell, he took care of business, and so that's probably true. What I really liked from Mitchell tonight, though, was and what I saw from the Jazz overall is I guess I'll go into a little bit of a comparison between the Jazz when they played Boston and the Jazz when they played the Bucks tonight. Is what I saw from the Jazz with Boston is they had more grit and they were able to close out the games. Well, what I saw from the Jazz tonight against the Bucks is they had kind of that they knew they were in control once they kind of got that lead, which I'm really happy to see. And I'm hoping it's not just that they felt confident coming off of a win against Boston, but I'm thinking this means that they know what role they need to play as a team. And so when it's like this game where they took a 20-point lead in the third quarter, they knew they were confident, they knew they had the game, and so they managed that. When against Boston, they knew like especially down at the end, like they could have lost, and so they were a little more serious and less because some of their plays tonight were kind of like circus show plays, which were fun. I don't want to see them do it all the time, but and when you're beating a team pretty bad, it's fun to see. Lots of more Laker questions. Honestly, I feel like that's one of the like we've been talking about the Lakers, like the Jazz versus the Lakers for like a month now. So when that happens, that's going to be an exciting game. And when we do that live stream after that game, like we better see like everyone who's here plus everyone that you know here, because that's going to be an awesome live stream. Even if the Jazz do lose, there's a lot that we'll be able to learn from that. So you, since y'all have been asking about it, you better turn out for the live stream. So I had a question. Hey, what is the other guy's name on this channel? So I'm Dale, and my co-host is Nate, and so we kind of switch off for the post-game reviews. But we will be doing an episode tomorrow with both of us. Also, we've been getting some more, like, I've been noticing on the chats, we've been getting more like personal questions about like how the channel was started and kind of how we met and that story. So if you guys really are curious more about that stuff, let us know, and maybe we can take some time to kind of tell that full story if that's something that you're interested in. This game really showed the depth of the Jazz franchise record, baby. Let's go. I know, like, I forgot to bring that up at the start because it was last game that they tied the franchise record for best start, and this game they took it. But honestly, I feel like I'm going to be repeating myself a lot because the Jazz, I don't know, there's not much negative to say about them with how they're playing, and honestly, they're kind of making it look easy, even against teams like the Bucks, which is not like the Bucks are incredibly good record wise. They're 16-10, so they're one of the better teams in the East. But I guess that's one of the best teams in the league. But they just made it look easy against the Bucks, which is like, I don't know what else to say. The Jazz are just that good. Okay, who is my favorite team in the NBA and why? So I was born in Texas, and so my brother, from like the time that I was like 3 or 4, the first name that I could say that like wasn't in my family was Dirk Nowitzki. So honestly, I grew up a Mavs fan. I moved to Utah though when I was how old was I? I was in 5th grade when I moved to Utah. So I adopted the Jazz as my second team. I still follow the Mavs and I love the Mavs, but honestly, this channel is kind of like, I hate to say it, but I'm spending a lot more time talking about the Jazz. So they're kind of almost my primary team, especially this season. I'm not even following it or what's going on with the Mavs, which yeah, and I got a question, lots of questions about questioning my loyalty to the Jazz. I guess maybe I just don't sound as excited as Nate does after wins. But no, the Jazz are awesome. They've been my second team ever since like 5th, 6th grade, and honestly, this year I think I did both the post games after the Mavs games. This year I'm rooting for the Jazz more than the Mavs, just because of where the franchises are at. The Mavs are not, even though they're like they should have a talented team, they're just not playing well, and the Jazz are in a position to win a championship. So especially this season, when the Jazz go up against the Mavs, I'm kind of rooting for the Jazz because that's kind of best for me, for both my fans, for both teams that I root for. Okay, so Weston says, so I want you to answer this question if you get the chance. Do you think the Jazz are the most skilled team in the NBA, and can one of the Jazz players get an MVP? As far as player skill, I'd say no, the Jazz aren't. They aren't the most skilled team in the NBA, just because how the Jazz play, it's, I don't know. That's a tough one. I'd have to like dig into it and figure out how I want to define most skilled team. But typically when you think most skilled, you think of a team that has a bunch of superstars. So just off the top of my head, I'd probably say the most skilled team is the Nets, because they have 3 incredible scorers. But the Jazz play a lot better basketball as a team. And so if you're talking about skill as an overall team, as a single unit, then I'd say that the Jazz are definitely in the conversation, probably top 3 or 4 for that. If not number 1, there's definitely a strong argument to say that the Jazz are the most skilled team as an individual unit, and I'd probably lean towards that they are right now at this point. And to follow the follow up question was, can one of the Jazz players get an MVP? I don't think they can this season. I know Mitchell has kind of been in the talks recently, especially now that the Jazz are doing really well. If he keeps playing like he did tonight and like he did against Boston, then I think Donovan Mitchell will get votes. And if the Jazz just blow everyone out and are far and away the best team record wise, then I think at that point Donovan Mitchell has a really solid chance. But with how this team is constructed, I don't think it's likely this year, just because they play as a single team, they play as a single unit. And so with that happening, sometimes you're going to see games, and this is my prediction for the rest of the season. I may be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see Donovan Mitchell score 10 points one game, just because there's like Mike Conley and Bogdanovich are on fire those nights. So he just doesn't have to score as much. And typically, if you see MVP players, you'll want to see them scoring 25 plus points almost every single game. And then if it's not 25 plus, they'll need to at least get close to 20 in order to get those averages, because that's kind of what it comes down to for MVP. So I think Mitchell has a chance. It's a real long shot at this point, though. Liked the Gobert Favors duo tonight. Agreed. I liked what Gobert did. He was a lot of times we talk about Gobert's what he does as far as screen assists, but tonight he was just finding the lanes off the screen or slipping screens, and the Bucks didn't have anyone posted down low to stop him. So, or the man came up with Gobert, and then Gobert got the first step, and that gave him either a lob threat or they got the pass to him. So awesome. And yeah, and this scrolling thing, it messes me up sometimes. I miss questions because it scrolls too fast. Okay, so I think the Bucks need some help for the team to gel. I agree. And honestly, I'm super excited about this win because of what I saw from the Jazz, and I think it is a statement win. But I feel like it's not I feel like a lot of people are still going to have questions just because the Bucks aren't what they were last year and the year before that. I'm curious to see what the Bucks do. I root for Giannis. I like Giannis. I think he's a cool player. So I'd like to see him win one eventually. Obviously, that's me talking as an overall NBA fan. I think Giannis winning one in Milwaukee would be good for the league, but if it means that the Jazz don't get one, then I'd rather Giannis not get one. If you're following my logic. So MKB says the Jazz will beat the Lakers. The Jazz are playing better than ever. Yeah, I agree. I think they will beat the Lakers, but then again, it's Lakers are a good team. Maybe the Jazz have an off night, or even if the Jazz have an on night, maybe the Lakers just have a better night. So I'm with you. I do think the Jazz will beat the Lakers, but Lakers are one of those teams that I think it will be a close game, even though the Jazz have been blowing pretty much everyone out, even the good teams. So if we see the Jazz blow out the Lakers, that would be awesome. So Carter says, ask Nate, and I want to ask you, who would win a playoff series in the 1998 Jazz or the 2021 Jazz? So I think Nate, he answered, it would depend on what rules. So he said, if it was in the 90s Jazz would win. If it was now, the current Jazz would win. I would agree with that, but I'll give a different answer just because I know that's what you're looking for. And I think even in the 90s, I don't know. It's tough because I don't want to disrespect the 1998 Jazz because that team was awesome. But here's my logic behind why I think the 2021 Jazz would win. And this is just saying, if the 98 Jazz played like the 98 Jazz did, and if the 2021 Jazz played how the 2021 Jazz, how they do play, I think the team this year would win because I think basketball has evolved, and I know there's the argument that like what Nate said, what rules are we playing? But I think a lot of people get too nostalgic about older players, but what happens is new generations come in, learn from those older players, build on, and like you see great players build on that. So I think like Jordan, he built on all the superstars that he grew up watching. LeBron, he's built on Jordan. Like players like Kevin Durant are building on LeBron. And so I think basketball is kind of evolving into a more efficient game, and we can argue like whether it is actually or whether it's just like um I don't know, the word escaped me, or if it's like an illusion that it is. But my argument would be that the Jazz now would win because like even though the 98 Jazz defense was awesome, their offense was a ton of fun. It wasn't as high powered as offense now, and our defense, like the current Jazz defense, is awesome as well. So I think it would be tough for the 98 Jazz to keep up with what we're doing right now. That would be my argument. Not no disrespect to the 98 Jazz. I love that team. Uh, but yeah, that would be my argument for that case. Maybe if you took it, it'd be a much different conversation if you take the 98 Jazz and put them, let's say they grew up in the same generation as our 2021 Jazz, and maybe then you'd see players like Karl Malone. He'd probably be shooting a lot more threes, and John Stockton would definitely be shooting more threes as well. So uh, if you want to take that, that'd be a tougher hypothetical to figure out, and that's a whole nother conversation. Um, uh, so a question: so Quinn Snyder, Coach of the Year; Jordan Clarkson, Sixth Man of the Year; Rudy, Defensive Player of the Year. Honestly, like if you would ask me at the beginning of the season, I'd say Quinn probably would be in the running for Coach of the Year, at least what I thought. I wouldn't know if he would be or not. I didn't know that they would do this, but I think Quinn Snyder is deserving of a Coach of the Year award almost every season because he's that good of a coach, in my opinion. Coming into the season, I would have said Jordan Clarkson, definitely Sixth Man of the Year, and coming into the season, I would have said Rudy Gobert, not defensive player, because not because he wasn't deserving, but because I feel like after winning two in a row, voters would have been bored of giving him a third. And I know two in a row was what was it, 2 years ago when that happened. But honestly, I feel like they're kind of the favorites at this point. I feel like Jordan Clarkson, he's as close to a lock for sixth man as you can get at this point in the season. And I feel like Rudy is the front runner for defensive player at this point, and Quinn is the front runner for Coach of the Year at this point. So that would be awesome if the Jazz bring home that much hardware just from the regular season awards, and hopefully they can bring home some playoff hardware as well. That would be a ton of fun to see. I have one more question. So Weston says, I have one more question. Do you think that that today's Jazz could beat the old Bulls with MJ? Um, I'll just use the same logic, saying that basketball has gotten more efficient. Um, but that one, like, and I feel like that one would apply even more where it's, are we playing 90s rules or today's rules? Because I feel like the Bulls with MJ, with Jordan, they were a lot more physical than the Jazz were in the 90s. And so, um, and like with the Jazz, they're probably like their most physical player is probably Derek Favors. And so if you were allowed to hand check still, then the Jazz would have a tough time playing the Bulls, and they'd probably get beat up. But like if it's today, so that one I'd probably put a little more nuance in, just because those Bulls teams were more physical than the 90s Jazz teams, not necessarily because of the talent there. But then again, maybe today's Jazz just can hit so many threes that it makes up for it. So there's that chance as well. Um, so Carter says the NBA can't afford the Jazz to win a championship. Um, I I'd be interested to hear like more of your thought process behind that, because I think I understand where you're coming from with the NBA can't afford to like for the Jazz to win because um like if imagine if it's like the Utah Jazz and the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA Finals, that's not going to sell nearly as much, and like it's not going to get as much attention as if you see something like Lakers Celtics. And so if that's kind of where you're coming from, that makes sense for me. Um, yeah, I can see that. I don't think I don't think that it would hurt the NBA a ton. It would just be, and the NBA has taken some revenue hits in the past couple of years because of everything that's been going on. But um, I don't know. Maybe a Jazz, maybe like a Jazz championship could be exactly what the NBA needed because then maybe smaller fan bases are re-engaged and because I feel like sometimes small fan bases are they can kind of be disenfranchised with NBA, especially since it's the big teams that win over and over again, even when the small franchises have good teams, and so that's where you get a lot of like rumors like, oh, is the NBA rigged? And um, I don't know. So whether that's true or not, if the Jazz win, maybe it does help the NBA in the long run. But that'd be interesting to see. Either way, I hope the Jazz do win, whether it is good or bad for the NBA. Um, would freak out if Donovan Mitchell came on this chat. Same, but honestly, if uh, I don't know if that'd be a good thing or a bad thing. I'd love it because that would be awesome. But if I was an NBA player right after a game, would I want to be hopping on a live stream of someone talking about the game that just played? But that would be super cool. Yeah, I would love to talk to Donovan Mitchell. He's not only is he like an awesome player, but um, I feel like there's like the league of superstars like Steph Curry, where you're like they're an awesome player, but they're also just an awesome guy, and like you'd love to talk to them. And I feel the same about Donovan Mitchell. I think he's a really good guy. So if I ever had the chance to talk to him, I think that'd be awesome. Do the Jazz need an enforcer now that Jay Crowder is gone? Uh, I wouldn't say need. Like I feel like a player like that helps. I feel like you plug Jay Crowder into any team and he helps that team where he's at. So if I could wish Jay Crowder to magically be on the Jazz right now and it would fit with the cap and we wouldn't lose any other rotational players, then I'd be happy to do that. But I don't think the Jazz need to actively go out and make a move. Um, that is a good question though because those like enforcer type players are often needed more when it comes to playoff time. And so maybe uh, I still think this Jazz team is good enough that that they'll do fine in the playoffs even without someone like that, without someone as physical like that. But that's a good question. That's something to think about. I'll stick with it. That it would be awesome to have one, but the Jazz don't need to make a move for it. Um, and then and the follow up question, is is enforcer role like more old school? I'd say that it isn't. Even if the game is getting less physical as far as the rules go, like um, less is allowed in the rule book. I feel like when it comes to playoff time, the refs let a little bit more slide, and we saw that for some teams that didn't have enforcers. I'll bring up the Mavericks because they're top of mind, but you saw like when the Mavs were playing the Clippers, um, Montrezl Harrell was and who was it, Marcus Morris, were kind of beating up on Luca and talking smack. So everyone's like, oh, like if the Mavs had someone like Jay Crowder, then they could push it back and it would kind of negate that because that's kind of what that was kind of the Clippers vibe last season. I feel like they lost a lot of that. So um, I don't know. That'd be interesting to see. That's just taking like last year, and last year was kind of different. So I'll stick with an enforcer is nice, but not as required as it would be in like the 90s. Um, Donovan does invite himself to random parties. Yeah, Donovan's kind of fun. Um, I feel like this. Okay, I won't dig too deep into this because so what I do for work is I do marketing and I do a lot on social media. So I guess um I kind of had I for personal, just for fun, I kind of did an analysis of how like Donovan Mitchell, because social media is more in use and he can communicate with the fans, how I feel like players who do that and handle that more, they're more endearing to the fan bases. And I think that's one reason why Utah loved Donovan Mitchell almost immediately. And it did help that he was awesome on the basketball court almost immediately as well. Um, Carter says you and James Hansen need to have a collab video. You know what? I agree. I'll honestly I'll reach out to him and see if we can do something. I think that'd be a ton of fun. Obviously, his audience is a lot bigger than ours, but our content's really similar. I think it'd be fun if you guys enjoy it. Then I think that'd also be cool. Um, and then I've been on here for like 41 minutes. So Carter, you just asked a question. I'll answer Carter's question and then I'll wrap the chat. So stay to hear the answer, but and then yeah, I'll do the wrap up. So Carter asks, what will be the outcome for the Clippers back to back, and will Paul George play? I'll have to go see. So it's the Clippers back to back. I haven't been following the Paul George situation, so I don't really have a I don't really have a good opinion on that. Honestly, with how the Jazz have been playing, the Jazz beat the Clippers earlier on in the season, but that like the Clippers weren't really playing like they are now. But the Jazz weren't playing like they were now either. So honestly, I would say I'd like to say that the Jazz win both. Obviously, the Clippers are a good team, so I'll have to be a little wishy-washy there because yeah, the Clippers are a good enough team that it wouldn't be shocking, and I wouldn't say that the Jazz season is ruined even if they drop both of them. But I think the Jazz are playing as a better team, and the Jazz have what it takes to beat them 2 times in a row. So if I had to give an answer, I would say Jazz win both of those. And then I don't know what's going on with Paul George, but if he doesn't play, then that obviously makes it easier for the Jazz. But yeah, everyone think this was a ton of fun. Awesome win. Last 2 games were awesome wins. Thanks for joining us for this live stream. It sounds like there's some more support for us reaching out to James Hansen. So I'll reach out to him and see if he's open to do something. I'm sure he would be. Maybe I'll have to talk him into it. But that would be a ton of fun. We'll keep you posted if anything happens there. Thanks for joining the stream. Awesome win for the Jazz. If you aren't subscribed, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, because we'll be putting out a video tomorrow as well as a post-game analysis for the Jazz game tomorrow against the Heat. So make sure you plan time in your Saturday to watch those. But everyone, yeah, thanks for joining me and have a good Friday night.